There are nights when the darkness falls, and only then does one truly feel the weight of loneliness. Outside, the rain beats steadily, each drop heavy as the heartbeat of a desperate mother. And under the pale fluorescent lights of a late-night pharmacy, a story began. A story about a desperate embrace, a whispered voice, and a small miracle powerful enough to change a destiny. That night, beneath the city's cold street lamps, Lauren Miller, a young single mother, rushed into a little corner pharmacy. In her arms, baby Lily, not yet a year old, whimpered softly, her flushed face burning with fever, her eyes shut tight in exhaustion. Lauren was drenched from head to toe, her tangled brown hair plastered against her cheeks. In her trembling hand, she clutched a crumpled prescription slip, as worn and weary as her life had been. The pharmacist glanced at the prescription and tapped a few keys on the register. A number appeared on the screen, $86.40. For many, that was just the cost of a nice dinner. But for Lauren, it was a towering wall she had no way of climbing. She dug through her battered old wallet, pulling out worn bills, loose coins rolling across the counter. She counted, then counted again, her blurred vision stinging with tears, $43. Half hope, half despair. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice catching. "I'll get paid next week, but my baby needs the medicine now." The pharmacist sighed, not out of cruelty, but bound by strict policy. "We can't accept partial payment. I can hold the prescription for 24 hours if you'd like." At that moment, Lauren felt the ground give way beneath her. Her knees wobbled, her heart pounded painfully in her chest. Lily let out a piercing wail, her frail cry splitting the night like a knife carving through her mother's heart. Lauren clutched her daughter tighter, tears mingling with the rain. "I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying." And then a voice came from behind. Not loud, not commanding, but steady enough to cut through the darkness wrapping around her. "I'll pay. Charge it to me." Lauren spun around stunned. Behind her stood a tall man in a dark overcoat. His features were sharp, but his eyes carried a strange gentleness. There was no pity in them, no judgment, only certainty, only warmth, like a flame glowing in the winter night. The pharmacist hesitated for a beat, then nodded and began ringing up the medicine. Lauren waved her hands frantically, her voice breaking. "No, please. You don't even know me." The man, Ethan Carter, a successful businessman in the city, shook his head softly. "You don't need to know someone to care. No one should ever have to choose between money and their child's health." Those words so simple pierced straight through the armor Lauren had built over years of believing no one would ever reach out a hand for her. Ethan paid, and as the pharmacist packed the medicine, he discreetly slipped his business card inside, as if leaving behind a small doorway she could one day walk through should she ever need it. Lauren accepted the bag of medicine, her hands trembling as though she were holding treasure. Baby Lily pressed her face against her mother's chest, her breathing already growing steadier. Lauren lifted her eyes, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan only smiled. "No thanks needed. Just take her home and keep her warm. That's enough." Lauren bowed her head, tears spilling through her weary smile. With her baby in her arms and the medicine tucked beneath her arm, she stepped back into the rain. But now, somehow the rain felt lighter. That night, for the first time in weeks, she took a deep breath, as though pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Inside the pharmacy, Ethan watched the fragile figure of mother and child disappear into the night before quietly leaving himself, vanishing into the sound of rain and flickering streetlights. Lauren's apartment was a damp basement room with peeling walls and worn-out carpet. But that night, none of it mattered. Lily slept soundly in her crib, her tiny breaths a lullaby of peace. Lauren sat at her bedside, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll protect you no matter the cost." When she opened the bag of medicine, Lauren froze. Nestled beside the bottles was a business card. Its print was sharp refined. "Ethan Carter, private line. When you need to breathe." She held it for a long time, her gaze fixed on that one word, breathe. Her chest tightened. She had never imagined a stranger could make her feel seen, heard, and given hope, with just a single act. Under the dim kitchen light, Lauren tore a page from her notebook. With trembling hands, she wrote, "Dear stranger, you don't know me. You may never know me. But tonight you helped my daughter and me breathe again. You didn't just save us. You reminded me that I still have worth. Thank you. She folded the letter carefully unsigned. The next morning, she skipped breakfast to save her last few dollars. She bought a cheap white envelope and the most inexpensive stamp. Slipping the letter inside, she pressed it against her chest as though sealing her heart inside it. It was the only gift she had to give the stranger who had stepped into her life like a beam of light in the night. She mailed it to the company address printed on the back of his card, without hesitation, without looking back. She had no idea that somewhere else in the city that letter would stir a heart long thought to be made of stone. In the towering skyscraper downtown, Ethan Carter returned to his office after a long string of exhausting meetings. On his desk, amid a stack of thick files, his assistant had left a small envelope. Scrawled across it in clumsy handwriting was the word personal. No sender, no return address. Just a quiet question mark in a world where surprises rarely came, where everything was usually reduced to numbers and contracts. He opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper. Each line of writing seemed to echo in his mind as he read silently. You didn't just save us. You reminded me that I still have worth. Thank you. Ethan read it once, then twice. By the third time, the words were no longer just ink on paper. They became a voice inside his chest. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. And suddenly, memories surged forward. He was 8 years old again, lying on a cold iron bed in the orphanage. The room was silent, except for his ragged cough echoing in the dark. The nurse on duty stopped by briefly only to mutter, "You'll be fine," before disappearing for the night. No one came back, no one held his hand, no one whispered, "You'll be okay. I'm here." Ethan remembered that bone-deep loneliness. He remembered staring up at the ceiling praying for a miracle, but no one ever came. And now, reading the words of a nameless woman, he realized this was the first time in his life that he had spoken aloud the very words he once longed to hear. "I'll take care of it." He folded the letter carefully, reverently, and tucked it into his old leather wallet. That wallet already held two treasures, a faded photograph of his mother and a cheap birthday card from a social worker. Now, this letter became the third, a testament that sometimes even the smallest act of kindness could mend wounds thought impossible to heal. That evening, as the city lights glittered outside, Ethan sat alone in his high-rise office staring down at the sea of people below. For the first time in years, something stirred in his heart. It wasn't sparked by a deal closed or by the shine of his public success. It was the handwriting of a struggling young mother clinging to survival. He found himself wondering, who is she? How does she live? And deep within, a quiet voice whispered, maybe. She's the one who saved me from the numbness I didn't even know I had. Meanwhile, across the city, Lauren never imagined the letter would reach him. She had written it simply to give thanks, to ease her conscience, to prove she wasn't ungrateful to the man who had appeared in her darkest hour. She continued her life as usual. Endless shifts at the diner, long nights holding Lily close as the baby wheezed softly in her sleep. Yet inside her, something had shifted, a tiny spark reminding her that perhaps the world still held hearts capable of giving without expecting anything in return. She kept Ethan's business card on her nightstand. She never called. She never dared to believe she had the right. But sometimes, on nights when Lily burned with a low fever, or when bills piled high, she only needed to glance at the small words, "When you need to breathe," and she would inhale just a little deeper. Ethan, too, began to change. In the days that followed, each time he touched the leather wallet with the folded letter inside, he saw the world differently. He started walking outside, more often sitting in parks to watch children play, lifting his eyes to the sunset instead of burying himself in endless emails. The letter became a reminder he was still human, with a heart that longed to be touched. A week later, Ethan sat through another important meeting. His partners discussed multi-million-dollar investments, profit strategies, but in his mind, he still heard the words from the letter. "You reminded me that I still have worth." Worth? He smiled faintly. For years, he had measured worth in dollars, status, and respect. But now he realized true worth came from something far simpler, helping a young mother buy medicine for her child. That night, Ethan opened his desk drawer where he kept his most personal belongings. An old watch from a mentor, a photo of the dog he once had, and now that letter. He read it again. And at that moment, he knew. He wasn't alone anymore. A stranger had unknowingly become a mirror, reflecting back to him the heart he had long buried beneath the cold armor of a CEO. Elsewhere, Lauren hurried home from her shift, worn shoes pounding the pavement, Lily bundled in her arms. She didn't know it, but she carried a new light inside her hope. And somewhere, the stranger she called Savior felt the same. They hadn't met again, but the thread between them had already been tied by a business card, an unsigned letter, and two wounded hearts quietly reaching toward each other. A story had begun, and fate would bring them together again in ways neither could imagine. The elevator doors slid shut, reflecting Lauren's tired face in the polished mirror. She clutched a tray of coffee cups, her hands trembling slightly for fear of spilling them, her eyes wishing only to escape unnoticed. It was just another morning, except today she was delivering to a skyscraper she usually only admired from the street below. Just as the doors were about to close, a firm hand slipped inside. The doors reopened and a man stepped in. Lauren froze. Ethan Carter, in that instant time, seemed to stretch. He was no longer just the stranger from that rainy night. He stood right in front of her, now dressed in a navy suit that fit perfectly his crisp white shirt, open at the collar, his coat draped neatly over one arm. He radiated the calm composure of a man seasoned by life. But what unsettled Lauren most were his eyes. They weren't distant nor indifferent. They were warm, instantly recognizing her. "It's you," he murmured, his voice filled with both surprise and delight. "I never thought I'd see you again." Lauren faltered. You remember me." Her face flushed. She quickly lowered her gaze to the tray of coffee. I'm just making a delivery." He smiled softly, tilting his head, as if to dissolve the distance. "And I'm just taking the elevator." The doors opened on the 27th floor. Lauren hurried out, the weight of the tray straining her shoulders. Just before she stepped away completely, his voice called after her. "If you have a moment, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. Just 5 minutes." Her heart raced. She shook her head quickly. "Really, you've already done too much." "It's not about that. I simply want to sit with you for a moment. Nothing more." Lauren hesitated. She had a delivery to make, her shift to finish. But there was something in his voice, gentle and pressing, that eased her nerves. "I need to drop this off first," she whispered as the doors opened wider. Of course he nodded, not pushing. "Another time, maybe." She gave a small nod and slipped away without promising anything. 10 minutes later, after the order was delivered, Lauren found herself standing in the lobby of the building, her heart still restless from the unexpected encounter. Her eyes drifted to the small cafe kiosk in the corner. A thought crossed her mind, and her hands trembled as she ordered a single black coffee. She didn't go back upstairs. Instead, she pulled a white napkin from the dispenser, took a pen from her bag, and carefully wrote a few small words. "You helped me breathe. Maybe today this cup will help you pause for a moment." No name, no trace, just a quiet gift. She handed the cup and the napkin to the receptionist, her lips forming a shy smile. "Please give this to Mr. Carter." Then she walked out into the morning sun, her face tense yet her heart oddly lightened. Later, when Ethan returned to his office after a meeting, a still warm cup of coffee sat waiting on his desk. Beside it, the folded napkin with its short message. He lifted it, reading once, then twice. By the third time, a smile tugged at his lips. Not the polite smile he wore for clients, but a rare one, genuine, tender, touched with vulnerability. He placed the napkin carefully in his desk drawer, where he kept his most treasured items, the old watch from his mentor, the faded photo of his late mother, the anonymous letter from that rainy night. Now, a small napkin joined them. Another thread tied to a woman he could not forget. He took a sip of the coffee. The strong bitterness spread across his tongue, but inside, warmth bloomed. She knew I needed a moment to stop, and she gave it to me. Meanwhile, outside the building, Lauren's heart still beat wildly. She scolded herself. Why did I do that? He's a CEO. I'm just a coffee runner. Yet a voice inside whispered, "He helped me breathe." I only wanted to remind him that he too deserves to rest. She expected nothing in return. For Lauren, it was enough to know he had received it, that she had given back in some small way the kindness he once gave her. That night, Ethan sat alone in his luxurious penthouse, the city glittering below. He took out the napkin and read it again. And then he realized most people came into his life chasing wealth, fame, or favor. But Lauren, She gave him a cup of coffee without asking for anything. She wrote words without signing her name. It was rare. It was real. And Ethan felt his heart stirred in a way it hadn't been in years. Sometimes it doesn't take grand gestures to touch a soul. Sometimes just a single cup of coffee and a handwritten note is enough to make someone believe they're not alone. Lauren and Ethan, two people from different worlds, had just handed each other an invisible thread, a quiet connection, delicate yet powerful. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would become a pivotal piece of their story. A story of learning to trust. A story of opening hearts. Because often it isn't the great acts, but the simple ones, like a cup of coffee and a folded napkin, that remind us we are not alone. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of a small community center on the outskirts of town. Children's giggles echoed through the room, mingling with the patter of running feet and the clatter of toys. Amid the cheerful chaos, Lauren sat cross-legged on the floor, her hair tied back loosely, her face bare, yet glowing with a gentle smile. In front of her, several children crowded around, reaching for the star-shaped cookies she had brought. "Slow down, there's plenty for everyone," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough warmth for the children to listen. She placed the cookies onto small plates, then leaned down to comfort a little boy sniffling at the back. "Here's yours. And you know what? You deserve every good thing in this world." Lauren didn't know that just outside in the hallway, a pair of eyes had been quietly watching. Ethan Carter stood there, his dark coat still on, not yet removed. He had come to the center at the director's invitation to discuss a potential company donation. The plan had been simple: a few photos, a symbolic check handoff, then leave. But the moment he stepped inside, his eyes landed on Lauren, the woman he hadn't been able to stop thinking about since their brief elevator encounter. He stood frozen, hidden in the shadow of the doorway, watching her care for the children. There were no cameras, no audience, no stage lights. Only Lauren tenderly wiping a child's nose, tying another's shoelaces, smiling as if their happiness was all she needed to keep going. In that instant, Ethan realized this wasn't kindness for show. This was kindness born from the heart. A little girl with wild curls dashed over and wrapped her arms around Lauren. She climbed into her lap, burying her face in Lauren's shoulder, searching for comfort. Lauren began to hum a lullaby, the notes imperfect but overflowing with love. "You know," Lauren whispered softly enough for the girl alone, "even if the world forgets you, you'll always matter. You'll always deserve love." Ethan's chest tightened. Memories of his own childhood came rushing back. Nights in the orphanage when he had longed for words just like those. He had never heard them, but here was Lauren giving them away so naturally, like breathing. He wanted to step inside to thank her, but his feet wouldn't move. Instead, he kept watching. And then something unexpected happened. As Lauren bent down to tidy the cookie tray, a small object slipped from her coat pocket, a folded paper star. It rolled gently across the floor, stopping near Ethan's shoes. Lauren, too busy lifting another crying child, didn't notice. Ethan crouched, picking it up. On the fragile folds, written in faint blue ink, were the trembling words, "I may not have much, but I still have love to give." He sank into a nearby chair, speechless. Turning the little star over in his hand, he realized this simple childlike trinket carried something far greater, a piece of who Lauren was. He closed his fist around it as though afraid it might vanish. Inside the room, Lauren continued tending to the children. Her smile meant not for anyone watching, but for the little faces that needed it most. Ethan looked at her, and something inside him shifted. He had seen countless acts of charity done for applause, for headlines, for prestige. But Lauren was different. She gave even when she had nothing left to spare. And because of that, her love was priceless. In that moment, Ethan stopped seeing himself as a CEO, stopped seeing the gap of wealth between them. He simply felt like a man, touched to his very core by the compassion of a woman. When the afternoon drew to a close, Lauren left the center with Lily in her arms, telling her a fairy tale as they walked home. She never knew Ethan had been there, never knew he had taken the star, now tucked safely into his wallet, alongside the anonymous letter from the rainy night. He closed the wallet with a quiet reverence, his heart swelling with something he could barely name. It wasn't just admiration, it wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something that felt like a spark catching flame inside a heart that had long been cold. Ethan stepped out into the bustling street, blending into the crowd. but he knew he had just crossed a threshold he couldn't return from. Sometimes a single paper star can hold a universe, and sometimes one shaky line of handwriting is enough to make a frozen heart beat again. Lauren had no idea, but from that day forward, Ethan carried not only her midnight letter, but also this fragile star. Two sacred tokens proving that even in scarcity, her love was abundant. And from that moment on, he realized he didn't just want to watch her from a distance. He wanted to draw closer to step into her world, a world of struggle, yes, but also of fierce love. Another invisible thread had been tied between them, delicate yet strong, just like the folded star resting in his pocket. That afternoon, Lauren entered the gleaming high-rise with a tray of coffee and a bag of pastries. It was one of her usual deliveries, beverages for an office on the 27th floor. The smell of freshly brewed coffee rose through the packaging, its warmth seeping through the paper and making her arms tremble slightly under the weight. She hurried across the lobby, nodding politely to the security guard, and stepped into the elevator. When the doors slid open at the 27th floor, her nerves grew taut. This was the most luxurious section of the building, the offices of top executives. She set the tray on the receptionist's desk for order verification, and then a deep, familiar voice spoke from behind her. "Lauren." She turned, startled. Ethan Carter stood there, his dark blue shirt sleeves rolled up his tie, loosened after a long day. His eyes lit with surprise and warmth the moment they found hers. You work here," she blurted out before remembering where she was. Of course. This was the Carter building. Her cheeks burned as she quickly lowered her gaze to the coffee tray. Ethan chuckled softly, stepping closer. "Looks like I'm lucky today. I was just wishing for a cup of tea, and it happens to be you who brought it." Lauren fumbled with the bags. "I'm just working. I'll be on my way as soon as I drop this off." He studied her briefly, then spoke gently. "You've been on your feet all day. Stay for a few minutes. My office is just there. Just one cup of tea, so you can rest." The invitation was simple, unforced. Lauren hesitated, then gave a small nod. And that was how she found herself stepping into his office, a space bathed in the fading glow of late afternoon sunlight, spilling across the polished wood desk, opening the door to a conversation neither of them expected to matter so much. The large office was hushed, filled with golden light from the setting sun, filtering through tall windows. Normally, Ethan would have left by this hour, but today he remained, choosing instead to spend a few more minutes with her. Lauren sat in the chair across from him, her fingers nervously interlaced, her posture cautious, but her presence radiating quiet grace. Ethan placed a cup of chamomile tea before her. "This is gentler than coffee. I thought you might like it." Lauren looked at the cup, then back at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You read me fast." He smiled, not reading, just noticing. The room seemed to still around them. Outside, the city roared on, but here in this pocket of light, it was only the two of them, sharing words that seemed ordinary, yet carried unexpected weight. At first they spoke of simple things. Work the weather. Then Lauren began to talk about Lily. She told him how her little girl had recently started making sounds as if trying to sing, how she once pointed at a flower in the park and laughed until she hiccuped. As she spoke of her daughter, her eyes glowed with pure, unguarded joy. Ethan listened, never interrupting. Every nod, every gentle question made Lauren feel as though she was truly being heard. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't have to pretend she was fine. She could simply be herself. That shy smile, the spark in her eyes. It softened something inside Ethan. He realized these small glimpses into her life had the power to reach the deepest parts of him. When the clock hands moved toward evening, Lauren rose, thanking him for the tea and the company. In her rush to grab her bag, she didn't notice a slim folder slipping from her lap onto the carpet. The door closed behind her, leaving the office in a tender silence. Ethan returned to his desk and spotted the folder lying by the chair. He picked it up, assuming it was nothing more than notes or receipts. But when he opened it, he froze. Inside were pencil sketches, faces of children, everyday scenes, bright eyes, innocent smiles, tiny arms locked in embraces. The drawings were simple, yet brimming with emotion, each line echoing warmth and tenderness. And then, in the middle of the pages, one sketch stopped his breath. It was him, wearing a dark coat, holding Lily in his arms. The scene captured that night in the pharmacy, the light overhead shining down his face tilted gently toward the baby, while Lily nestled peacefully against his chest. At the bottom corner in small handwriting were the words, "You became someone's safe place maybe without even knowing." Ethan sat motionless, his chest tightening before slowly expanding with something luminous. His mind replayed the chain of keepsakes, the anonymous letter, the folded paper star, and now this sketch. 3 invisible threads, all of them leading back to Lauren. He placed the drawing gently on his desk, unable to take his eyes from it. The truth rang clear within him. Lauren had seen him. Not as a CEO, not as a wealthy man, but as someone who could be safe. The city lights flickered beyond the glass wall. For the first time in years, Ethan's office didn't feel empty. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Thank you for seeing me." Sometimes we don't realize we've become someone's safe place. And sometimes being seen that way is the very salvation we didn't know we needed. Lauren hadn't meant to reveal anything. She had only forgotten a folder. But in that accident, she left Ethan proof that he had been recognized not for his title or power, but for the simple humanity inside him. And from that moment on, a new piece was set into the mosaic of their story. Not only about helping, but about seeing and being seen. Night fell across the city, the streets glowing faintly under the blur of street lamps. In her small apartment, Lauren sat by the window, silently watching Lily sleep in the old crib. The baby's gentle breaths were like a lullaby of peace. But inside, Lauren's chest waves of turmoil rose and fell. On the nightstand, her phone lit up with a new message from Ethan. "Lily may be lucky to have you, but I think I'm the lucky one to have met you." Lauren clutched the phone tightly, her eyes blurring with tears. She knew he meant it sincerely, but deep inside fear whispered back, "You're not worthy. You don't belong in his world." Those whispers weren't new. They were echoes from her past, of a father who walked out without a word of a first love, who disappeared when she found out she was pregnant of neighbors, who once smiled at her, but turned away when debt notices hung on her door. She had grown used to being left behind, so she had taught herself not to expect, not to lean, not to hope, because if you don't hope, you can't be hurt. The next morning, Lauren was working her shift at a small cafe where she picked up part-time hours. The smell of roasted beans lingered in the air, mingling with customers' laughter. But in a corner, she overheard 2 co-workers whispering, "Did you hear Ethan Carter, that famous CEO, was spotted with Lauren?" "Yeah, her, the one working here." The other girl snickered. "Seriously? A millionaire with a single mom, who even brings her kid to work? Sounds like some cheap romance movie." They burst out laughing. Lauren froze, her hands shaking so hard the tray of coffee nearly tipped. She turned quickly before they noticed, but their words pierced her like blades. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed, Lauren sat on the edge of her mattress, haunted by the mocking voices. Then, in her memory, another voice surfaced. Her mother's sharp and cold, "You're not worthy of a decent man. You should know your place." Her chest ached. She pressed a hand against it, whispering toward her sleeping daughter, "You deserve the world. And I'm learning to believe that maybe I do too." Her phone lit up again. Another message from Ethan. "Lily's lucky to have you. I hope one day you see what I see." Lauren broke into tears, not because she didn't believe him, but because she feared she'd never be brave enough to believe in a happiness like that. In his penthouse, Ethan stared at the dark phone screen. No reply came, but he didn't mind. He wasn't asking for answers right away. He only wanted her to know he was there, steady as a rock, if she ever reached for him. So he began sending her small fragments of his world, a sunrise from his balcony, a line from a book he was reading, a picture of a golden leaf on the pavement. No pressure, no expectations. Just reminders of presence. Lauren read them all. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she cried, but always she remained silent. One evening she sat at her table, typing and deleting, until finally she pressed send. "I need to learn how to stand before I can walk beside you." Ethan read the message over and over, his heart heavy yet shining. He understood. She wasn't rejecting him. She was reclaiming herself. And he knew real love wasn't about holding on tight, but about waiting with patience. He didn't reply. He gave her space. 2 days later, Lauren handed in her resignation at the cafe. With a small community grant and her meager savings, she enrolled in an online course in early childhood education. By day she studied, by night she baked banana bread, peanut butter cookies, blueberry muffins, selling them at weekend markets or on a little online shop a friend helped her set up. Each morning she took Lily to the park. Lauren walked slowly while her daughter laughed from the stroller. Under a tree they would split an apple and read a tattered comic book. To outsiders, it was nothing. But to Lauren, each moment was proof she was finding her footing, step by step. One afternoon, while helping an elderly woman cross the street, Lauren knelt to tie the woman's loose shoelaces. The woman placed a trembling hand over her chest and whispered, "You move like someone who's decided she matters." Lauren looked up and smiled, unexpectedly warmed. Those words were like a fresh wind blowing through her, scattering the old whispers that had once convinced her she was nothing. Ethan still watched from a distance. Sometimes he sat quietly in the park where she took Lily, content just to hear the baby laugh. He didn't approach, didn't intrude. He honored her words to let her stand on her own before walking beside him. He would sit on a bench watching as Lauren lifted Lily high, both of them bursting into laughter. Pride swelled in his chest. He thought, she's changing. She's finding herself again. And all I need to do is wait. Because sometimes love isn't possession, it's silence. Not honeyed promises, but patience, giving someone the time to find their own strength. Lauren chose to walk alone, not to leave Ethan behind, but to draw nearer to him one day as an equal, not as someone in debt. And Ethan, once a man closed off by loneliness, had now learned to love through respect, trust, and hope. Their story wasn't ending. It was only turning to a new chapter, one where silence itself became a confession and distance a fragile but unbroken thread between them. Late summer afternoons painted the park in soft gold. Young leaves shimmered in the breeze, children's laughter rang across the lawns, and the air carried the fragrance of cut grass. Lauren sat on an old wooden bench, gently rocking Lily's stroller, with her hand, her eyes following her daughter as she tottered unsteadily across the grass. Lily's giggles blended with birdsong, softening the weight in Lauren's heart. She didn't know that, across the path, Ethan Carter sat silently on a stone bench watching from afar. He had come here many times, not to disturb, only to make sure she and Lily were well, to listen for the child's laughter. He had kept his promise to give Lauren the space to stand tall. Yet, in his heart, he had never truly left. But today fate seemed to want more. Lily looked around, her clear eyes suddenly sparkling when they landed on a familiar figure. She stretched out her tiny hand and shouted in her sweet, ringing voice, "Safe." The word struck Ethan like a lightning bolt. His head snapped up, and he met the little girl's gaze. Lauren, too, turned toward where Lily pointed. Her heart jolted when she saw him, the man she had avoided for months. For a moment, everything froze. Ethan rose, walking slowly toward them. Lauren clutched Lily close, her emotions tangled, unsure what to feel. But Lily wriggled eagerly, reaching her arms out toward him, calling again and again, "Safe, safe." He stopped right in front of them, his eyes meeting Lauren's. In his gaze was hesitation, but also tenderness. He held out his arms, pausing as if asking permission. Lauren wavered. Then at last, she placed Lily into his embrace. And as if there had never been distance at all, Lily nestled into his chest, her tiny fists clinging to his shirt, her body relaxing with a relieved sigh. Ethan's arms tightened gently around the child. His voice broke as he whispered, I was just a stranger on a rainy night." Lauren shook her head, her eyes glistening. Not to her. In her sleep when she's frightened, she calls out, "Safe." And now, I think she knows it's you. Ethan bowed his head, pressing a tender kiss into Lily's soft curls. He whispered, "All I ever hoped was that she could breathe. I never imagined she'd see me as something greater." Lauren's chest trembled. All her years of shame, the cruel whispers of unworthiness surged back. But, at the same time, another voice rose within her. The voice of reality. This man didn't walk away. This man waited. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice breaking, "I don't know how to thank you." He looked up, his gaze so earnest it stole her breath. "Lauren, you don't owe me anything. If anything, I owe you, because you and Lily taught me to see myself again. I thought I saved you both, but the truth is, you saved me first." Her tears spilled over, but this time they weren't heavy. They felt like rain washing everything clean. They sat together on the park bench, Ethan still cradling Lily, who drifted in and out of sleep, her lips murmuring the word, safe. Lauren spoke in a low, steady voice, telling him about her new life, how she had quit the cafe, how she baked at night for extra income, how she had enrolled in an online course in childhood education. She didn't say it to complain, but to show him she was truly trying step by step, building a better future. Ethan listened intently, every detail engraving itself in his heart. When she finished, he smiled and said quietly, "I'm proud of you. You didn't just get back on your feet. You rose higher. You're stronger than you ever believed." Lauren dropped her gaze, her voice trembling. "I could only do it because someone on a rainy night reminded me I still had worth." They sat in silence for a long while, the wind rustling leaves overhead, Lily's breathing steady in his arms. Finally, Lauren lifted her eyes, honest and vulnerable. "Ethan, I'm still not sure if I'm brave enough to walk beside you. But I know this. I don't want to lose this feeling, this reminder that I'm not alone." Ethan reached for her hand, holding it lightly. "I'll be here, whether you walk fast or slow. I'll be here as a safe place. Not for you to lean on, but so you'll know you're never alone." As the sun lowered, they left the park together. But this time, they weren't two separate souls heading in different directions. Though no vows were spoken, a bond had formed undeniable and clear. Lauren carried Lily in her arms, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Ethan walked quietly beside them, smiling softly at the little family before him. For him, that alone was enough. Sometimes the smallest moments become the milestones of a lifetime. The word safe from a child's lips wasn't just a name. It was recognition, a declaration that a once lonely man had become the anchor of a fragile family. Lauren was no longer merely surviving. She was learning to trust. And Ethan, who once thought wealth could fill the emptiness inside, realized that only love, real and human, could do so. A new chapter had begun for them, and this time all three, the mother, the child, and the man called safe, would step into it together. The auditorium shone bright under stage lights. Every seat was filled the hum of voices blending with the soft clinking of glass. On stage, a banner stretched wide, Mothers Rising, a night to honor resilience. Backstage, Lauren stood nervously clutching a note she had rewritten 5 times. Her hands trembled, her heart pounding as if trying to escape her chest. She had never spoken before a crowd this large. In fact, she had never believed she had anything important enough to share. But the invitation letter had said, "Your story may be the reason another mother chooses to keep walking forward." That sentence alone had made it impossible to say no. She peeked through the curtain. Faces blurred under the glow of lights, but in the front row she saw him, Ethan. He sat in a deep navy suit, his tie slightly loosened. He didn't wave, didn't smile, but his gaze was steady, unwavering, directed toward her. In those eyes she read the silent promise, "I'm here." Her name was announced. Applause rolled through the room. Lauren drew in a breath, stepped onto the stage, her heels tapping against the wood, like her own unsteady heartbeat. At the podium she bowed slightly, her vision blurred under the spotlight. Her voice, though shaking at first, carried a quiet determination. "I'm not a speaker. I don't know much about stages or microphones, but I do know what it feels like to fight battles in silence, to hold a feverish child in the middle of the night, not knowing if she'll make it till morning." The hall grew hushed. "My name is Lauren Miller. I'm a single mother to a little girl named Lily. Not long ago, I held her in a pharmacy burning with fever. I didn't have enough money to buy her medicine. And in that moment of despair, a stranger leaned forward and whispered to the clerk, 'Charge it to me.' The audience held their breath. Lauren glanced down at her notes, then folded the paper and set it aside. She didn't need it anymore. That act saved my daughter. But what truly saved me was what came after. He didn't disappear. He reminded me again and again that I still had worth. That even when I couldn't believe in myself, someone else did." Her throat tightened. Ethan bowed his head in the front row, his hands clasped together, his eyes blazing with emotion. "I used to think survival was enough, but I've learned healing takes more. It takes someone to believe in you before you can believe in yourself. Today I know I'm not just existing. I belong in this world, and every day I teach my daughter the same." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she stepped back from the podium. At first the applause came slowly, then swelled like waves breaking against the shore. Lauren bent her head, overwhelmed. She was about to leave the stage when a sound stopped her. The scrape of a chair. Ethan stood. He walked slowly toward the stage, each step echoing in the silence that had fallen again. The entire hall seemed to vanish, leaving only him and her. He climbed the steps, standing under the same glaring light, and took her hand. "I thought I was saving 2 lives," his voice carried firm, yet tender. "But the truth is, they saved me first." He turned slightly toward the audience, his voice steady. "All my life, I lived unseen. But meeting Lauren and Lily changed everything. Because when someone truly sees you, it can change your entire world." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Lauren's tears spilled freely now, but they were tears of joy, of release. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. A year later, a quiet suburban street bathed in morning sun. Laughter of children drifted from a newly opened preschool. A sign above the door read, "Little Roots Learning, where every child belongs." Inside, Lauren knelt in the entryway, lining up tiny shoes on a shelf. On the wall hung her framed diploma in early childhood education, the proof of her hard-won journey. Few knew the school's deposit had been made possible by Ethan's silent support. He had never mentioned it, only stood back and let her write her own story. The door burst open. Lily ran in, waving a piece of paper. "Mommy, look." Lauren bent down. On the paper, 3 simple figures were drawn: a woman with long hair, a little girl with curls, and a man in a long coat. Above them, in wobbly, childlike letters, it read, "My family." Lauren's breath caught. She pulled Lily into her arms just as Ethan stepped into the doorway, sunglasses pushed back into his hair, a glass of iced tea in hand. His eyes softened as he watched them. "Safe!" Lily squealed, leaping into his arms. Ethan swept her up, twirling her until her laughter filled the room. He looked at Lauren, his voice low and certain. "Maybe I wasn't saved as a boy, because fate meant for me to become the safe place for the 2 of you today." Lauren moved closer, wrapping her arms around both of them. For the first time, she wasn't holding on to survive. She was holding on to keep something whole, her family. Not everyone who needs help is weak, and not everyone with wealth is truly strong. But when 2 wounded hearts find each other, they can build a family out of broken pieces. It only takes a whisper, "Let me take care of it." One small act can change everything. Lauren, Ethan, and Lily had proven it true. Their little suburban house glowed in the sunset. Wind chimes tinkled softly as Lily's laughter rang through the yard. Flowers leaned toward the breeze, releasing gentle fragrance into the calm evening. Lauren sat on the wooden swing, her hair lifting in the wind, her gaze tender, as she watched Lily play with the neighbor's dog. Ethan came out from the porch carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He sat beside her, handing one over. She accepted, leaning her head lightly on his shoulder. No grand promises were spoken, no distant vows. Just this quiet moment, enough for them to know they had found where they truly belonged. Lauren whispered, "Once I thought surviving was enough." Ethan tightened his hand around hers, his voice steady and warm. "And I thought I'd never have a family. But then, we found each other." Lily came running, wrapping her small arms around them both. Her eyes sparkled as she declared, "My family." 2 words, but enough to close the long journey of tears and hope.